Welcome to 12 Days of Music Stories. Today is day 4, and day 4 is Susan Rogers. Susan Rogers was born in 1956 and grew up loving music, except she couldn't play it. She tried taking piano lessons but said she had zero affinity for performing. But she was constantly listening to the radio and said that she listened to records like a fiend. And sometimes she would be looking at records and there would be a picture of a studio, and she dreamed of what it would be like to be in that place, to be in a studio actually making records. So looking to make her dream come true, she moved to Hollywood in the 1970s and set about trying to get her dream job working in a recording studio. She had a friend that was going to a school called the University of Sound Arts to learn how to be a recording engineer, but Susan couldn't afford to take classes there, so she ended up getting a part-time job as a receptionist instead. And while working there as a receptionist, Susan overheard this conversation that changed the course of her life. She heard these people talking and they said, instead of being a recording engineer, if you really wanted job security, you should become a tech. Because equipment in studios was always breaking, and if you were a technician who fixed that equipment, you would always have a job. So that's what Susan was going to do. She got books like Modern Recording Techniques, and she taught herself how to be a technician. Finally, in 1978, she got a job working for this company called Audio Industries, and she worked as a technician, fixing consoles and tape machines, and she would go to studios throughout Southern California fixing their equipment. One studio that she got called to a lot was this place called Rudy Records, which was owned by Graham Nash and David Crosby. They had some old equipment that always needed to be fixed. And she went there so often that in 1981, when they were looking for an assistant engineer, they hired Susan Rogers. And now Susan was finally in the room doing what she had wanted to do since she was a kid, helping make records. But then in 1983, she got an even bigger opportunity. She heard that Prince was looking for a technician to help him out while he was recording in LA. And Susan said to herself, well, his search is over because that's my job. Susan was able to get in touch with Prince's management, and she got hired to be Prince's technician, helping him build a studio in Los Angeles where he would finish the recording of his album Purple Rain. But since Prince was pretty much doing everything himself on this album like he usually did, he played almost all the instruments, wrote and sang every song, produced and engineered the album himself, Susan ended up taking on a lot more responsibilities than just being his tech. First thing she did for him was help him record the guitar solo for Let's Go Crazy. Then she helped him record Darling Nikki. Pretty soon she was working as the de facto engineer on the album. And she said it was amazing to see this 24-year-old kid doing everything by himself, making one of the greatest albums of all time. But there was one thing that was difficult about her job working with Prince, and that is that he was insanely prolific. He was constantly recording, and he had tons and tons of tapes that he would be asking for all the time. It would be 2 or 3 in the morning, and he would ask Susan to pull a reference tape for him, and there was no organization to any of these recordings. So Susan decided to organize it. With what she called a very crude personal computer, she started making a database of everything that Prince had ever recorded. First, she organized everything that he actually had with him. Then she started calling other recording studios that he worked at. She called his record label Warner Brothers. She collected all of Prince's recordings and organized them into something that would later become known as The Vault. Now, Susan only worked with Prince for a few years, but they were years of his prime. After Purple Rain, there was Around the World in a Day, Sign of the Times, Parade, the Black Album. But then Susan moved on, and she moved up from engineer to producer. She produced some big hits in the 90s, like Geggy Taa's Whoever You Are and the Barenaked Ladies' 1 Week. Then in 2000, she left the music industry. Now she finally could afford to take some classes, so she went back to school. Eventually in 2010, she got her doctorate in music cognition and psychoacoustics. But the work that she did with Prince had a lasting impact, especially in 2008 when there was a huge fire at Universal Music Group and tons of masters were destroyed. This fire destroyed recordings by artists like Beck, Tupac, REM, and Nirvana. But the one Universal Music artist that was not affected by these fires was Prince, since all of his recordings were safely preserved in the vault created by Susan Rogers. So if you've ever enjoyed any unreleased Prince song, any B-side, any reissued or remastered album, you have Susan Rogers to thank. That's it for day 4 of 12 Days of Music Stories. Stay tuned tomorrow for a brand new story.